Hey guys, it's Sam, and this is my spoiler-free review of Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. This is currently a standalone book within the greater Cosmere universe by Brandon Sanderson, but it does have suspicions of possibly being continued, but that hasn't been announced yet. But this takes place in a world where there was a city called Elantris, and there were Elantrians. And Elantrians were this great magical people who anyone can become an Elantrian. You kind of get blessed with being an Elantrian. And you can do magic that allows you to do basically anything, and you are pretty much immortal, and everything that comes along with being a godlike being. But then 10 years before this book takes place, there was a kind of curse that happened, and all of the Elantrians lost their abilities. Many of them died, and they lost their magic completely. And so everyone that existed as an Elantrian and everyone that has become an Elantrian since just gets thrown into Elantris and forgotten about, and the city is in complete disarray and disrepair, and it's just a bad place. So this follows the perspective of three main characters, the first one being the crown prince of a city that exists right outside of Elantris, and in the very first chapter, he turns into an Elantrian and gets thrown into Elantris and has to learn to survive and navigate the muddy political waters of that city. And his name is Raoden. Then we have Serene, who was his fiancée, and she's actually from another country, and they were going to be bonded in a political marriage, and she is on her way to meet him, and he dies. But their betrothal agreement was that it was binding regardless of any death before they were even like officially married. So she is already on her way and doesn't know that he hasn't actually in fact died and that he's become an Elantrian. But then she's supposed to navigate the waters of that city and that political arrangement. And then we have a priest, Rathan, I think is how you say his name, and he is a competing religions priest. There is two religions that have formed out of one main religion. It kind of is like a Abrahamic type system almost. Like, it's not, but you can tell it's kind of based on that. And he is coming from another conquering nation trying to convert all of the people of the city outside Elantris into being that specific denomination, kind of, for lack of a better term. And so he is kind of navigating, again, the political system in Elantris and what all of it means. And all of these storylines obviously interweave throughout the story. So first off, let me just say that I put off this book for a very long time because everyone was like, this is Brandon Sanderson's debut book. It's not as good as everything else. I've already read Warbreaker and Mistborn, and those are really well loved, so I was nervous about this book. People were like, oh, it's not that great, so I was thinking it's going to be like a 3-star read, and I was wrong. So first off, we talk about the world building. I really enjoyed the world in this of Elantris in particular. I really liked a lot of the storyline that took place within Elantris. Elantris is a decaying, dying city. The Elantrians have turned into these people who look sort of like they're dying, but not in a zombie type way. But they do believe that they're dead. Their hearts do not beat. They do not heal in any way. So every single bruise or cut or anything that they have just adds up and compounds in pain, which is really interesting. So they can be basically beaten to death and not die and just live in like eternal suffering, and it's horrible. And their city is decaying. It's like slimy and gross, and there's no food because they don't get fed, because they can be alive even without food, but the hunger drives them insane, and it's just like a really interesting system. And the magic is also interesting as well, because something happened that kind of killed magic when they started going downhill as a society as well, and it was a very sudden thing. And the magic is like a series of symbols and is very scientific in a way, and that was really cool as well. And then I also really liked the political systems, and like, I always love when there's religion within fantasy stories because I find that really realistic. Societies of any kind are built around religions in a lot of ways, so I like having that element. And the themes in Brandon Sanderson's books are always exploring religion and doubting religion. Like, doubting of religion is a huge part of any of his stories, and it's not just doubting a certain kind of religion, it's like any of them. And I always like that element and what that brings to the table and what religion means to a people and how they're formed and all these things that he kind of explores within his books. So that was a good element as well, and it was really interesting. Next, I talk about the characters. I briefly touched on this in my wrap-up for last month, but I loved the characters in here, and I was very surprised because in Mistborn there are two protagonists that I do not like as much as another protagonist, and they are a female character who I think is very poorly written, and then a male character who seems very just like cookie cutter. And between the prince and his fiancée, these characters are so complex and well written and have agency and aren't just stereotypical, and I love both of them so much. The Crown Prince is just so pure, and I don't tend to love hero type characters, but he's so good and not in an annoying way, and I just adore him, and he's like just like a natural born leader, and I love him. And he has a bunch of friends that he forms obviously within Elantris, and they're fantastic. And then Serene, who's the fiance, is so spunky and so great. She does have moments of being like almost jealous of other women, but it's in like a realistic way, and it's not in a like putting down other women way. And I just adore her, and she's not like Vin was in Mistborn, who was so irritating. She has a balance, which is really interesting, because I was like, how'd you go from writing her to writing Vin, who's awful? But I don't know what happened there. There was a disconnect apparently, but I adore them. And then the antagonists in the story are really fantastic. So that priest that came is trying to convert everybody, you sort of want to hate him, and you do, but he has this element to him where he is like sympathetic. And I don't know how that happened, but he's really sympathetic. There's another antagonist that I like really hate, but this character is less of a villain. There's the other antagonist is more of a villain. This character is less of a villain and more of an antagonist, and he makes sense, and he has a sympathetic quality to him, which I think is really well done. And the way that he kind of intersects with the other characters, and he especially goes head to head with Serene because she's from a competing denomination and has a lot of feelings about him and what he's done and how he's trying to conquer not only this country that she's in now, but her homeland and all of this. So it's so interesting, all of their interactions, and like, again, the political machinations is like a huge part of this book. This book does have fantasy elements, obviously, with the Elantrians and the magic and what happened in the magic and all of that, but the majority, I would say, is very politically motivated and politically driven, and I really enjoyed how they're able to navigate that, all of them in different ways and in different settings. That was really cool. So since I'm already starting to get into that, let's get into the plot. I found the majority of this book, again, with the political stuff, really good. I liked the pacing of it. I didn't find it slow in any way. Sometimes I can find parts of Brandon Sanderson books slow, and then the endings are what tend to blow me away and are just like so good and just make up for a lot of that and are just like everything comes together. With this book, you kind of had the opposite. I found the majority of it pretty well paced, and then the very end was too rushed. A lot of things were just kind of dropped in that I didn't feel were foreshadowed enough and weren't explained enough when you have all this, you know, his books are large. So when you have all this space to do that, I felt like it wasn't a good use of time, and that the ending actually brought it down a bit. Or in fact, I wouldn't even say brought it down, because I feel like I had a set idea of what the rating was going to be, and I thought that it would probably get bumped up with the ending, knowing what I know about past Brandon Sanderson experiences. And it just didn't. It just left it kind of where it was. So that was surprising to me, because usually his endings are just like so blowout. And they were very like fast paced. It was very like engaging and oh my gosh, what's going to happen? But I felt like it was the weaker point of the story, which was interesting. It wasn't something that I was expecting. But overall, I did really enjoy this book. I'm going to be doing a spoilery gush on this book, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. So I'm very excited to be moving on to more of the Cosmere after this. Now I've talked to a bunch of people, because people have been asking, like, when are you going to get towards Radiance and like the Stormlight Archive specifically, or the second Mistborn trilogy? And I wanted to get this book done first before I did that, so I didn't have to go back to this. So now I am able, in the coming years, because it's obviously going to take me years, to get to those more recent Cosmere editions. So that's very exciting. So comment down below and let me know what you thought of Elantris. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see all of you guys soon. Bye!